Welcome again to another session of Between the Lines here at SAC TV. I'm your host, Randall Hogue. We have a special guest today, Pete Vroman, which we're going to get to that in a minute. Pete is running for State Assembly. In the last couple of months, we received some awards here at SAC TV, one of them from the Schenectady Human Rights Commission. Senator Hugh Farley, who we all know and love, who's retiring this year. We got a certificate from him as well.
Good job.
Jim Tedesco, and believe it or not, Angelo Santa Barbara, who's also running. So we don't play political party, whatever. We try to be nonpartisan here at SAC. We find out that it's really what's in the best interest of the public, so we like to bring people. And one of the things that's happening here in the city of Schenectady is that because it's overwhelmingly one party, and the other side, the people who are running for office in, shall we say, an opposition party, don't get a lot of coverage locally. And we want to take that opportunity because that's what we do. We want our public to be informed, and we want our public to be well versed on the issues, so we think an intelligent voter makes for a good democracy.
Yes.
And the best way we can ensure that is bringing the information to the public. So with that, I want to invite Pete here to tell us a little bit about his history and his background. And we're going to talk to a little bit, actually, the Vroman family goes way back into the history of the Mohawk Valley. Is that right?
Yes, it does. History of the country. Certainly does. Yeah. Well, first I want to say congratulations on the citations that you've received.
Thank you very much.
This is, and I'm honored to be here and good to see you again. Yep, I'm Pete Vroman, and I'm running for New York State Assembly, the 111th District, which takes in Montgomery County, Bern and Knox up in Albany County, and a good portion of Schenectady County. Pretty much the hill towns out west in Schenectady, all the way down to Union Street and west. Big district, and I cover a lot of ground, and I think I'm between me and the troopers and the truckers. It seems like that's all that's out there on the Thruway at night lately. But,
well, tell us a little bit about your background and what brings you to this stage of running for office and this particular case at this time,
Well, I'll tell you that I always liked public service. I always wanted to be a policeman because I like to help people and I like to be outside. So that really drove me to get into public service. I started, I was a policeman in Vermont, and then I transferred home to the Saratoga County Sheriff's Department where I was a road deputy, and did a lot of good police work there. And in 1986, I learned and I heard about the U.S. Marshal Service, and I applied and went through testing, physical testing, all medical testing, the test, and I ended up getting an appointment, getting a position as a deputy U.S. Marshal. That was in '86, and of course my first duty station wasn't around here. I had to go to Manhattan. And
what an experience that must have been.
It was good and bad. I was in the late '80s in New York. Lots of things were happening. Rudy Giuliani was the U.S. attorney. There were so many people that were up and comers at that same time. But it was funny, when I worked down there, all of us were from different parts of the country. They had a problem staffing that city office. So when we moved out of there, now I had a network of contacts throughout the country. All my buddies, all my brother and sister deputies. So let's see, so I was a deputy U.S. Marshal for 28 years. Through those 28 years, if you think about it, all the number of good and bad things that have happened in this country, and the marshals are an agency that responded to pretty much every one of them, and I responded to pretty much every one of them. Both Trade Center bombings, Oklahoma City bombing, the LA riots.
It's quite a lot of experience.
It was a lot. Man-made and natural disasters. Yeah, we covered it all, and we still do. And then when I became senior, if I didn't go, I sent people there to these things, which caused me to have to manage an office and do more with less. Okay. And back home here, that was part of the mission. But okay, so I was a marshal for 28 years. I retired in January of 2014 for 5 days. And I was appointed
to a long retirement?
It was a nice, relaxing, long retirement, yeah. And I was appointed to the position of undersheriff in Montgomery County. So I did that for about almost a year, and it was a good experience. They work hard out there, and it was different. It was different than being a marshal,
Yeah.
Obviously, but it was a good experience for me. I'm glad I did it.
Now, all those years in law enforcement give you a kind of a different perspective than the average public, as far as what's going on out there in society. I know you mentioned New York. I lived in New York, and there was a big turnaround. At one point, crime was rampant in the city of New York, and it did get under control around the same time you were there. Now, we're not giving you 100% credit.
I did a good job while I was there. Yeah.
The idea is, though, that I remember when there was very little respect for law and order in the city, and I mean the criminals had a lot of leeway, and it has turned around a lot, and the entire city improved. I mean, the quality of life, the environment. There's so many things that go along with good quality law and order, and cleaner,
Much.
and respectable. We remember growing up, the kids would be able to go out and play down the street, and you weren't really worried about a lot of things. Well, New York in the 80s, you were worried about what was going on down the street,
Right.
and it's gotten so much better since then. So we see, the importance in that. Now, how does this experience in law enforcement bring you to maybe a unique perspective in the challenges right here, right now?
Well, as a law enforcement officer, you have to build partnerships, you have to communicate with people to get the job done, and to go home safely at night and make sure everyone goes home safely at night. I managed a multi-million-dollar government contract involving seized vehicles and stuff for years. The experience in public service, you see people at their best, you see people at their worst, you treat people with dignity. You network to get things done, and you learn how to do, like in my case, I learned how to do more with less. And you build a reputation, hopefully a good one, with people. And I think these are skills that I learned and that I earned, certainly, that this state is really crying out for now. That we really need an outsider that has earned these skills. I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. We need to apply these skills to the state, and now is certainly the time. And that seems to be the consensus in from St. Johnsville to Hamilton Hill. Everybody is dissatisfied with the state of their government, and they do want change, and they want more to be done. Less ceremony and more action. And you know what? I got to tell you, when I made the transition from being a marshal to running for state assembly, I ran for state assembly 2 years ago. To go from being a under the radar, low key marshal, where if you got your picture in the paper, the next day you were in to see the boss. They didn't want
to know why.
They wanted to know why your picture was in the paper. To suddenly being out there and having my name on signs and meeting a lot of people. But I do love people, and I want to help. And I realize with this job, it's about compromise, and I'm about compromise to make good things happen for my constituents and lessen the amount of bad things that are going to happen.
A lot of people don't realize that something like the assembly position is really two kind of jobs in a way. You're representing the people in your district to the state level, and you're also a state representative, meaning you get involved in creating legislation that affects the entire state,
right,
and the state's relationship even to the national government. I mean, there's a lot of responsibilities.
Yes.
And it's good for people to know, what they're looking at. So with that, there's two really different sets of challenges. There's the local challenges, like the economy and we say law enforcement issues and quality of life and so on right here. And then there's also the state issues, the issues in the bigger picture. So
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you see in those two challenges?
Well, certainly my constituents come first, and I will do whatever I can to make good things happen for them, for us. As far as representing the state, we all know what the problems are here. We know there's corruption, actual and perceived corruption. We've lived through it with all of these arrests out the state. We have seen being from Galway and seeing and living really along the river, along Amsterdam, and coming down to Schenectady, geez, I remember how bustling those places used to be. So I think the biggest challenge and a lot of the problems that our area face are really the lack of jobs, the lack of good solid jobs. Manufacturing jobs, that's what made this area. When I got out of high school, I worked at a cloth mill in Amsterdam. And
Which I'm sure no longer exists.
well, it's funny you mention that, because where the new bridge in Amsterdam, that beautiful new bridge that they put in,
Yeah.
the south landing of that is where the mill is that I used to work at, me and hundreds of other people. So manufacturing certainly, jobs certainly. I think if you get people working, less idle time, you're going to contribute to the tax base, you're going to buy stuff, they're going to pay school taxes. I think that number one, you know, being a marshal and having to put out a lot of different fires at the same time, I was able to develop the skill of really zeroing in on what the problem is, the core problem is, and addressing it, and then moving on to something else. And I think that's what we need to do here. But I see the problems here as really lack of jobs in this area.
Now, what are some of the things you feel that they can do on a state level and bring awareness and creation of jobs to the valley here? Because we really are talking about Mohawk Valley and a little north and south of it, but
Yep.
the Mohawk Valley was the manufacturing center of New York State at one time. I remember from some of my studies that in the 1880s, the Mohawk Valley was the wealthiest part of the entire state.
I believe it.
Per capita. And of course the Erie Canal running right through the middle of it didn't hurt either.
Right, right.
But the idea is that manufacturing jobs obviously have changed, and they've gone, and we're really probably thinking there has to be some thinking out of the box that's going to bring in a new flow of businesses and employers, and whether it's manufacturing or something else. So tell me about some of the ideas you might have to help promote that.
Well, we have I think an underused resource in the New York State Thruway that runs right through there. I do have some ideas, some specific ideas about boosting commerce in those areas. I think, I know that I would use whatever power that offered, the power of the assembly, to go out and aggressively encourage businesses to come back here and show them exactly what we have. We've got the Thruway, you got Buffalo on one end, you've got New York City, you've got Montreal on the other. I think you need to be aggressive about it, and to lure them here and to bring them here. It's funny, there's really nothing has happened on the Thruway from Schenectady to Utica.
It's almost like you get on the Thruway and you just go through, and then you get off wherever you're going, but
I don't know.
Nowhere in between.
Right, but I do have some ideas. I do have some solid ideas that I would release later on about what we can do to make that area more productive.
Well, I like the old. I'm sorry. Did I?
Well, I just want to say too, on the same, new industry and new business is great, but we also have to recognize these businesses that have been here and reward them too, that have toughed it out in New York State. Not an easy place to do business here, and I've heard about it from St. Johnsville to Hamilton Hill.
Yes,
to Bern. It is not easy to do. We need to, it's great bringing new companies in, but we have to also reward these people, these folks that have done business and toughed it out with us here. Lessen regulations, help them out, because if you let them grow a little bit, our economy will grow. People will work. People will spend money.
Before I left New York City, my job was running manufacturing facilities for women's clothing. We used to set up factories all over, and the union that we dealt with had 176,000 members. So quite a big union.
Wow.
In the 1980s, thanks to politicians, which is I take the Hippocratic oath and say, first do no harm. During their terms, through regulations, they literally destroyed the manufacturing industry in New York City as far as apparel. It used to be the world capital of manufacturing for clothing was in New York City.
Right.
And I mean, not Paris, or where, it was New York City was the main component of that industry. Hundreds of thousands of jobs later, and most of it being in middle management like I was, in between setting up factories, and at a time when legislation was created to make incentives to move factories overseas. During that time period, we can see what politics can do to business. And totally decimated that manufacturing sector, which is a fraction of what it used to be. And I see that when I came upstate New York, I see examples through this sort of Rust Belt area of what's happened. And people need to realize their vote is extremely important. And what happens, and we're talking about health, education, welfare, safety, issues like you were talking about in the Marshal Service and so on, and jobs, and all these things are essential. People don't realize that the legislation that's created by the representatives they send to the state and they send to Washington is where all these things happen and where all this stuff takes place. And then someone like yourself that understands the problem is essential, and having ideas of how to combat the problem. So we get to the first do no harm situation and say, I'm sure that there's a lot of legislation that has been created that needs to have a good hard look at.
Certainly.
Because they actually are diminishing the ability to do business in the region through this legislation.
We see it. We live it.
And that means someone that has to have an understanding of what's going on and how to turn it around and kind of have a plan, you know. So for us here in the Mohawk Valley, we also, and throughout this region, the region that you're running in, we also have other issues. Transportation, as you say, with the Thruway is one part of it, but this was a transportation hub as well, with the canal, with the Thruway, with all the things that, you know, there's a great opportunity. As you know, part of the district of St. Johnsville is the exact geographical center of New York State. If you draw lines from all the parts, that's the center.
Right, and that is a very depressed area out there. You go through St. Johnsville, and whatever manufacturing was there is long gone, and it is an area that is hurting. Yeah, definitely. You know, you touched on, you said that's why these state positions, it's very important to have someone that is an outsider that can bring in skills, is not a politician, that is good at problem solving and cooperating. And these positions are very, very important. They're very important. They're the buffer between big government and us down here, really are. So it's very important that people recognize that.
In our own town in Canajoharie, we have a beech nut facility which moved from one part of the county to the other, manufacturing and jobs and so on. But we're left with 26 acres of empty buildings. So is that really economic development? I'm not so sure. And if it is, maybe we need to redefine it.
It's not the kind we want, certainly. Yeah, it's not the kind we want.
Yeah, it needs to be redefined.
Yeah.
We have architects that we've worked with over the years in different areas and talk about adaptive reuse, because we have so many in Amsterdam, Canajoharie, and other ways. Empty factory buildings, infrastructures that were built for, well, in Canajoharie's case, we have a sewer and water plant that was built for a population of 10,000. We have 2,000 and change.
Right.
And that was because of beech nut. So moving the plant away from the infrastructure that was built without a plan to pay off the bonds on those plants was not a wise
It was not. No, it was not.
And it wasn't in the best interest of the people. And unfortunately, without getting into party politics,
yes,
it wasn't your party that did all this, but the idea is that somebody out there needs to be looking at the big picture. And having a family like you do in Canajoharie, and they go to the school district and they have their future ahead of them, and you've had this experience in law enforcement, then you can have a lot of ideas and how to look at the big picture.
Yes, and not be there forever. Come in, help out, bring my skills, my problem solving, contribute to making the area better with my ideas, and that's really what I see myself doing. And that's it, and I'm not going to be there forever. You know, I've had a career.
Are we talking about term limits here?
We are kind of going towards term limits. Yeah, I am for term limits.
Well, what do you? What would be a term limit in terms of that particular position?
I think the same term, any that is good enough for the president is good enough for every office underneath that.
So it's like 8 years maximum or something like that?
Yeah, I'm about that. I think, you know, listen, the corruption, the issues we've had in Albany, I think a lot of it is contributed to people getting in there and getting removed from the day-to-day and getting out of contact with the day-to-day, and Jeepers, it tends to get very stale, and I've seen it. We've all seen it. And I think if there were term limits in place, Sheldon Silver and Skelos wouldn't be looking at orange jumpsuits right now. They wouldn't have been allowed to get that powerful. They should not be. They should not be allowed to get that powerful.
That's a big
Really,
part of it.
you go down, you serve the people, and you do what you can do and help out, bring your skills, and then you go back home.
We had a conversation with Sheldon Silver about the beach nut plant when it was going on.
Boy, yeah.
And we made a trip to Albany, and we asked to speak to him about it at the time when it was first discussed that they were
Right.
going to move the plant and everything else. The prior year, they had given $3.5 million to the plant in order to upgrade the plant.
Yep.
After the flood that they had and so forth. And our question was, if you gave him $3.5 million of assembly funds, speaker funds, whatever it was, to upgrade and modernize or whatever to keep the plant in Canajoharie, how do you know that they spent the money on that purpose? Because obviously now they're looking to move out. Where did they use that money for that purpose? Where did the money go or whatever? Right. And the answer that we got was that this is part of the speaker's discretionary funds. There are no strings attached. There were no clawback provisions. This was simply just more or less a gift to the company. And that $3.5 million would have gone a long way towards an adaptive reuse plan for the village of Canajoharie's plant space.
It would have.
Okay? But they refused to even give us an answer as to what the money was spent on. And
that's our money.
And this is the type of thing.
It's our money. It's not their money. It's our money.
And this is the type of thing we're talking about, is that it wasn't obviously good for the village in this case, but no one's saying a beach nut, for example, couldn't move the plant and expand and do whatever do. But if we take that and we look at the whole Mohawk Valley and we see one building or plant or space after the next, like Mohawk Mills and all these other places, that's been left behind over the years, and it was done with a real lack of vision.
I think you see a total lack of vision in our state government, and it's almost like they're driving off the end of their hood. They don't look much further down the road than that.
Then they need to slow down.
I mean, first off, to have that much discretion, a fund of that much money, and really no strings attached and not accountable to anyone about it, that breeds problems in itself where there's no accountability. I see that. I don't know whether it's a lack of ethics training down there. When I was a marshal, of course, ethics are huge. Each year you had a certain number of hours about ethics training and what you can do and what you can't do, and if you do this, what can happen. Jeepers, maybe they're not getting that down there. It's certainly something I'll look at when I get into Albany.
It seems like there's a great reason for that. And a need for it.
There's a need for it. At least this transparency, and have other people, have 2 or 3 sets of eyes look at stuff before the final check is written. That's really the way to do it, just like at home,
I think that if you just look around and look at what's happened in the last 20, 30 years through the region, you can definitely see the need for it. And like you say, maybe it's in training, maybe it's in other checks and balances.
Well,
we were having a brief conversation just before this, and you mentioned to me that George Washington was one of your heroes, one of the founders of the country.
I think he should be everybody's hero.
Yeah, and I love to check and quote. What have you. I had sent a copy of George Washington's letter to Mario Cuomo when he was the governor, and he wrote me back, and he said that his favorite president was Abraham Lincoln. He has since had written several books since then about Abraham Lincoln, well-respected, well-researched books. So I reminded him that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican.
And what was his answer?
His answer was 2 books that he wrote.
2 books he wrote, yeah. Good.
But the reason why I bring that up is because we have a very volatile political situation going on in this country right now, without choosing sides or getting into all the other things that are going on and everything else. But George Washington once wrote a letter to the governors, the new governors of what was then the 13 colonies. And in the letter, he ended the letter by saying that democracy without a strong moral background is doomed to licentiousness. And I believe that that's true. The strong moral background has really got to be the core to democracy. And the other thing that he said in one of those letters was that political parties could eventually erode democracy because the parties themselves become powerful and influential rather than the people. So with that for the backdrop, tell me, you're running for this position today, and I can see how you would do a lot of good, and you come from a unique perspective.
Thank you.
And I think that we're all, as citizens, a little bit concerned on this political environment because it seems like the majority of the public don't really want either of the candidates that we have right now. I'm talking about the vast majority. It's special interests or party people on right or left or whatever. So a lot of us feel democracy is being exposed at a weak point here. Do you have any thoughts on that for the closing of our, and then tell us once more why you're running for this office?
Do you want to talk about my family?
Is that a lot? Is that too much?
It's a big question. I mean, it's how do you answer that one? We are at a funnel point right now. It seems. When I'm going door to door, knocking, campaigning, knocking on doors, and introducing myself to people and telling them what I want, who I am, and what I would like, what I bring, and what I would like to do. The presidential race comes up about every 4 doors, and they don't usually ask me who I'm voting for, but what I reiterate to them is how important these state positions are, Assembly, State Senate, because really whatever happens above that, it's the buffer, and you need a strong person in there that is well-based and well-concerned and concerned with our local issues here. To stand up for you and say no. So you need that. You need a leader as well. I think people are looking for a leader. They're few and far between. So I don't know if I answered your question directly, but I think that we are at a funnel right now, and I think everything will turn out good. I think we had a little rocky road ahead of us, but I think everything will turn out good. I'm very optimistic about it. And it seems like people are waking up, and I love the fact that people are interested in voting and are interested in these elections, and it does get their attention because of the colorful candidates that are out there.
Yes,
it has their attention. And
colorful is a good word.
Colorful, they are colorful. So why do I want to run? Like I think I said earlier, is that I have skills that I've earned throughout my public service career. I'm a local guy. I want to use these skills here to help people out and help my constituents out and really help the state out. And I would certainly look forward to bringing that. And I'm not going to be there forever either.
Well, we want to wish you luck.
Thank you, Randy.
And I want to thank you all for joining us today. And we're going to try to have Pete come back again, hopefully even before the election.
At any time, sure.
And talk to us on some more of these issues that are facing us here in the Mohawk Valley. So thank you for joining us for Between the Lines on SAC.TV. And you'll be able to see this on channel 16 on Time Warner Cable and channel 18 outside of the city of Schenectady. Should be in about a week from today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Randall. Thank you.